within the early days of the PlayStation 5, there has been a lot of talk about the variety of features it has and what it lacks. Notably, one of the biggest complaints coming out of the gate from PlayStation fans is the lack of viable storage options provided to players thus far. The system has about 825 gigabytes available on its SSD. Of course, this doesn't mean that players will have all 825 GB to use. Players will only have a maximum of 667 GB available to them and must buy a compatible NVMe SD hard drive if they want more space. This isn't possible for everyone, so it's important to look at the biggest file sizes for PS5 games to see what players should prioritize. Horizon Forbidden West is the much-awaited sequel to Aloy's first adventure. Just like its predecessor, it came out around the worst time possible, when another genre-defining game was making its debut. Still, Forbidden West is a fun game to get into, even if the title itself isn't all that innovative. It's clear to see why this game requires close to 100 GB of free space on the PS5, with its amazing graphics and high-quality textures needing this much space to shine on the hardware. Ever since it was first announced, Black Myth Wukong took the gaming universe by storm, getting thousands of players excited about its release. When it finally hit the shelves, it didn't disappoint in terms of narrative, game mechanics, and overall graphics. Giving players a Souls-like experience that, while challenging, isn't as frustrating as that of the Dark Souls franchise, Black Myth Wukong has managed to position itself as one of the best games released during 2024. Although its file size isn't even close to taking it to the bottom of the list, 104 GB is still considerable. In Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales Ultimate Launch Edition, players will step into the shoes of Miles, Peter Parker's young protege. Miles is tasked with protecting New York in Peter's absence, and throughout the story, players will see Miles' growth as a superhero in many aspects. When it comes to PS5 game sizes, this title doesn't have enough to make it to the top of the list, especially when there are games over the 300 GB mark. That said, its whopping 105 GB still represents 15% of the console's total usable storage capacity, 667.2 GB, meaning that players can only install another 5 games of a similar size without a memory expansion solution, which is very inconvenient. In terms of PS5 game sizes, there is always an iterative sports title that makes the list, as these tend to be packed with content. One of the biggest sports titles on the PS5 right now, purely by file size, is F1 2021. The latest Codemasters title based on the popular racing circuit brings many of the things players have liked in the past and added some new features as well. Among the new features is a new story experience called Breaking Point. In addition, the game features 2 new modes that players can try. One is a career mode where 2 players can play together. The other is a real season start, which puts players back in time to the start of the F1 season to see them crown a new champion. F1 2021 is 113.1 GB on PS5. With the release of the PS5, some of the greatest games from the previous generation were re-released on the newer console with enhanced graphics and some new content. One of these games released was Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, an expanded version of the hit Sucker Punch game. This version features all the content that was originally in the open world experience, but it includes an entirely new side area called Iki Island. Other additions to the game include a full Japanese lip sync for players who want to be fully immersed in the game's setting. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut currently sits at 113.6 GB needed. After a few rough years, WWE fans have been enjoying better wrestling games as of late, including the latest entry in WWE 2K23. Clocking in at 118.7 GB, it is also one of the biggest entries to date, likely for the enhanced graphics and the massive roster of wrestlers that will continue to grow. Along with many returning features, standout modes in WWE 2K23 include an interactive documentary where players can live through the career of the great John Cena while playing the game from his opponent's perspective. In addition, there is War Games mode that features steel cage matches with up to 14 players across 2 rings at once. NBA 2K25 was recently released, and it brought tons of new and improved game mechanics and elements that fans are greatly enjoying. Not only did this installment of the franchise bring back the auction house, but it also introduced a new dribbling engine that allows players to have more control of the ball during matches. This title also features ray tracing in the city and has improved player models and animations. With a considerable minimum requirement of 120 GB, NBA 2K25 is significantly large, especially considering that further add-ons and updates could potentially raise this past NBA 2K24's massive 156 gigabytes. Although it may not seem like the type of game that would take up a ton of space, Metro Exodus has a PS5 game size of 121.8 GB. While this is one of the biggest games on PS5, it may be worth downloading if players enjoy first-person shooters or games with a strong narrative. Metro Exodus is the final chapter in a trilogy based on novels written by Dmitry Glukovsky. The survival horror game has players exploring linear levels attempting to survive a world filled with creatures and humans who want to hurt the player. Despite not being the biggest Call of Duty game on the PS5, Call of Duty Vanguard does require users to have a decent amount of space put aside for it on the console. It is the latest entry in the series and the first game from Sledgehammer Games since their last World War II title in 2017. Much of the gameplay remains the same from previous entries in the franchise, but some new additions to the gameplay experience include being able to destroy walls and climb over objects instead of taking the normal paths. But what makes Call of Duty Vanguard 123.1 GB is all the various modes in the game, from the normal campaign to multiplayer to the co-op zombies mode. The third main installment in the beloved franchise by CD Projekt Red, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, has players exploring the world and taking on the most brutal of monsters. The entire package on the PS5 is about 127.8 GB after this next-gen version was released near the end of 2022. The main quest of The Witcher 3 revolves around Geralt of Rivia's mission to find his adoptive daughter, Ciri, who is being tracked down by the Wild Hunt. The complete edition on PS5 includes enhanced visuals and also includes a quest that is inspired by the hit Netflix show. Bungie was recently acquired by Sony to work on multiplayer games on multiple platforms, but before that point, they have been working on and continuing to release expansions for their multiplayer looter-shooter Destiny 2. The MMO offers 3 classes for players to choose from as they serve as heroes defending the last city. Along with many cooperative and competitive modes, Destiny 2's many expansions have given players hours of content to continue the Destiny 2 storyline. It is likely this reason why the game is sitting at 139.8 GB on PS5. Speaking of open world games, no company has embraced the genre harder than Ubisoft has. One of the biggest open worlds the company has ever published comes in the latest entry of their biggest franchise, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. The game takes place in the 870s. Players take control of Ivar, a Viking who is setting up their England and who becomes involved in the rivalry between the Templar Order and the Assassin Brotherhood. Assassin's Creed Valhalla has a massive world with plenty of activities to take part in, which may be why the game needs 140.4 GB to install and enjoy. The Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was an excellent game that players could enjoy quite a bit once they looked past its many bugs at launch. The sequel, Jedi Survivor, ran poorly on PCS, but the console versions were relatively stable at the time of release. The game takes up a lot of space but justifies this by showing just how much of a step up the title is from a visual standpoint. Jedi Survivor's legacy may be tarnished because of a horrid PC port, but players invested in Cal Kestis's journey will love the story's continuation and its fun action set pieces. Infinity Ward has been developing Call of Duty from the very beginning and, after a couple of entries without being the main studio behind them, finally made their first PS5 Call of Duty game with the release of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. A sequel to the reboot of the Modern Warfare franchise, the main campaign is focused on 2 forces who are hunting down Hassan Zyani, a leading member of the Iranian Codi's force who is armed with American missiles. The game also features many multiplayer modes, including its Battle Royale. The game requires 150.8 GB to install. In terms of annual sports releases, NBA 2K23 is one of the biggest file sizes ever. Sitting at a whopping 152.2 GB, the Visual Concepts title made some minor changes and continues to improve its graphics, but two key additions and updates define this entry. The first is the return of the Jordan Challenge. In NBA 2K23, players can go back to 1982 and play in a basketball game with Michael Jordan. In addition to this return, the Minba Career Mode has been revamped to include 4 different starting points for players to choose from. As players have likely gathered at this point, the NBA 2K franchise is known for taking up a lot of storage space in players' consoles. This is mainly due to the various game mechanics and game modes present in each of the installments, which make them very fun, but also considerably large, surpassing its predecessor, NBA 2K23, by more than 3 GB. NBA 2K24 boasts a significant 156 GB of required storage space, which is more than 23% of the total available storage space for the PS5. So, if players want to have the 2022, 2023, and 2024 installments of the franchise installed on their console, they should start deleting other titles to make room. Returning to Ubisoft, while Assassin's Creed Valhalla is one of the biggest games Ubisoft has ever made, Far Cry 6 is right there with it, and has an even bigger PS5 file size. With all the content currently in the game, Far Cry 6 has a current installment size of 158.7 GB. Set on the fictional island of Yara, players take on the role of Dani Rojas as they try to free the country from the dictatorship of Anton Castillo. The open world game has plenty of activities for Dani to take part in, which include various combat scenarios and fun challenges with a range of different weapons to use. While not living up to the level that many players thought the game was going to be, Cyberpunk 2077 did deliver a large world that takes up plenty of space on the PS5 drive at 159.6 GB. The latest game from CD Projekt Red, Cyberpunk 2077, takes place in a futuristic civilization set in the universe inspired by the tabletop role-playing game of a similar name. The game is yet another open world, as there are various regions for the player to explore. While there is a main quest to focus on, there are various side activities that help keep the game interesting as well. Players can choose from a variety of different roles and approaches that can help tailor their experience to something unique to them. Considering it is a genre that is meant to hook players for a ridiculous amount of hours, it is unsurprising that an MMORPG would be on a list of PS5 game sizes. What is surprising is that only one of these games made the list, which is The Elder Scrolls Online. Initially released in 2014, this spin-off entry of a beloved Bethesda property puts players on the continent of Tamriel. It lets them experience storylines that have some ties to the worlds and characters that they interacted with in previous entries of the series. As of the time of this writing, The Elder Scrolls Online sits at 168 GB, but this will change with future updates. As a live service game, it is understandable that Marvel's Avengers has a large file size given all the updates that have been brought to the game since its initial 2020 release. As of the game's latest update, the game requires players to have 192 GB free on their device to be able to become their favorite Marvel superheroes. Marvel's Avengers is an action-adventure game that has a central campaign that can be played with more than one player. However, the content that has been added over the years included story expansions for Kate Bishop, Black Panther, Spider-Man, and more. Future updates may still be coming for those who own the game, so it's good to have more space available. There have only been a handful of completely new games released by PlayStation Studios since the launch of the new console, but only Gran Turismo 7 makes the biggest PS5 game file size list. Once again developed by Polyphony Digital, the newest entry in the classic racing franchise brings a next-generation take on its celebration of vehicles. Gran Turismo 7 brings back many of the features that made its previous entries so enticing, but it also includes a lot of upgrades such as ray tracing and DualSense support that take advantage of the controller's technology. Those who want to dive into the game will need to have 196.8 GB free on their storage space. Vanguard takes up a lot of space, but the largest Call of Duty game on the system is double the latest entry. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War continued the trend from its predecessor, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, with ridiculously gigantic file sizes that will eat away at the PlayStation 5's SD. This is likely due to the number of game modes the installment has, as well as taking into account the game's upgraded graphics. The game currently clocks in at a whopping 312.6 GB minimum, which makes this the biggest game on PS5, even after many games have been released since then.